my name is Mu, and I've been in a demo scene around 15 years, and for me, it's more of a lifestyle than just a hobby. And the video you just saw, there were words that were describing demo scene, and those are actual words that actual demo sceners have used describing the demo scene. And today I have few guests, and we're gonna tell you and talk about a little bit what the demo scene is all about, and tell what the fuck is demo scene. So our first guest, Markku, and would you show his intro video? Thank you. That was your 4K intro. I believe it was quite victorious at assembly. Could you tell me more about this production?
Yes, this was called Yellow Rose of Texas, and gosh, it's 17 years since we made that. This was made with a friend of mine, Neck Freak. He made the tune there, and he made also the visuals there. So I was doing the system programming there, and the sound synth there is mine. And we, at Assembly 2003, we happened to win the 4K intro competition with this. And there's some little bits I could tell you about this. First of all, when I was doing the sound synthesizer for this, at this point 4K intros were mostly silent, or there was some like beeping maybe, but I made this synth, and I didn't know if it was any good. I knew that you could make music out of it. I'm no composer myself, so it ended up sounding pretty awful. But when I heard this tune made by Antti, Neck Freak, I was like, is this really made with my synth? Like, what did you do? Like, it's not supposed to sound like this. So he could get out of it some quite nice sounds that I hadn't even planned. And yes, when we were asked to come for prize giving, we were hearing the results, and we heard that the second one got something like 3,000 points, and then we hear it, we got 8,000 points, and we were like, wow, that was quite a victory. But then we heard it wrong, and it was 8,000 points more than the second place, so it was even better than we expected. I've been wondering at times if I'll ever be able to make anything this successful later on, or was this my magnum opus and my high point in the scene ever?
Yeah, so obviously you're a coder, but you're also a teacher and researcher. What have you been doing with researching? Because there's something with demo scene.
Yes, this also has to do with Antti, Neck Freak. In 2004 we started collecting these all these papers that have to do with the demo scene. We were university students and we were starting to get into research, and we started this little collection called the demoscene bibliography or demoscene research. And then later on, I've also been doing some demoscene research, like in the academic scientific circles, like first as a hobbyist and then little by little as a research professional. And also I did my doctoral thesis on the demoscene.
Yeah, so we could say that you are a true demoscene professional. Okay, but this production, it was 4K and it was in a compo. What means 4K and what are compos?
Right. Compo is just a shorthand for competition. That's not more complicated than that. But 4K means 4 kilobytes, 4096 bytes. So all that you have there, the code, the graphics, the music, everything has to fit into 4 kilobytes. And that's not a lot of space.
For me, it's kind of crazy. How is that even possible?
Well, like you saw in this little intro here, you have to reuse things, and definitely these days there's good tools for compression. So you do your code and graphics and music, and then you compress, like there's good tools for that these days. So actually the real size of the intro is much more than 4 kilobytes. But then when you submit it to the entry, it has to fit into those puny 4096 bytes.
Yeah, and why is there, what is a demo party? Why do you have competitions? What is it?
Well, if we look back in time, then there's the cracker scene with the copied games, cracked games, pirate games, their get-togethers where you would go and see others who were in the same trade. You would swap games with them. And those were the kind of first parties, even if they maybe were not called parties. And little by little, those little meetings evolved into larger parties, like assembly, the party, revision, whatever you have these days. And yes, a party is essentially a get-together. And there you can have competitions, you see your friends that you wouldn't necessarily see otherwise, and all sorts of other activities, like hanging around with your friends.
Yeah, and there's a lot of kind of traditions in demoscene. Why is there these things? Why do people shout Amiga? And what is there any other funny traditions?
Well, there's many of these. For example, different parties, they have their own little memes and traditions. The things you do at particular parties. This shouting is one of the traditions. Amiga, you shout because Amiga was so influential. The demoscene maybe started on the C64, Commodore 64 in the 80s, but it was really where it came to be the demoscene as we know it now. That was on the Amiga. Amiga 500 was the most popular computer in most like Western Europe, Finland included, and that's why Amiga has like a special place in the hearts of the demoscene. Other stuff you can shout, for example, is nice and bad, woman's head when you see a woman's head on a demo, and then there's other things that, well, maybe I don't repeat here.
Okay, maybe it's better. But yeah, so you a little bit started about that. How did the demoscene, how did this subculture started, and how you also you had your friend, you started to collect things and do computer hobbies, but how did it became this?
How did I get started or the demo scene get started?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, both. Well, the demo scene, like I said, started from this quite like loose cracker community, and then little by little, for many reasons, like the demo scene kind of evolved and diverged from the illegal cracker circles. Some people wanna say it was because there was like they were more interested in creativity and art than cracking those bad games, which was very competitive trade in itself. And some have other reasons for it. for example, what happened in the 80s, you could copy games in most countries. It wasn't illegal, so when we talk about like pirate games, they were not illegal per se. But then toward the 90s, mid 90s, most countries started putting some copyright legislation in place for computer software, and that's why there were like police raids and these sort of like nasty events, and that's, as I see it, one reason why people started to focus more in this like legal activities, so as not to risk getting your door kicked in by the police.
Yeah, well, also what I've heard is, I think some people also learned to code while they were cracking the games. Isn't that also?
Well, surely yes, but what we need to understand is that the crackers who remove the copy protections, that's what is cracking, and the people who made these little intros, so-called crack intros, that start the game. This is how I got involved in any way with the scene. I was playing pirate games with my friend Tommy in 1985 or 6. He had a new Commodore 64, and we saw these intros at the beginning of like those pirate games he had got from somewhere, and I was wondering, going, what is this stuff? This like bouncing text and like scrolling text, like I didn't get it at all. I just wanted to play the games. Like, let's skip this stuff very quickly. I don't want to see this. I just want to play the game. Only later on I came to appreciate the art form. But those people who were making those crack intros and actually cracking the games were not often the same. So there was already this sort of like little difference between the two trays.
Yeah, and well, from the history to future, how do you see the future of demo scene?
I wish I knew. What I can tell, it's what has changed. I'd say what has changed in the 2000s when you compare to the 90s. First of all, there's less rotation. So definitely in the 80s, still in the 90s, people would come and go, join the scene, leave the scene. Whereas in the 2000s, it's largely the same people you see. There's, of course, like newcomers coming in. There's some people like leaving and so on, but the rotation is a lot less. So at least that's one thing for sure that has changed. It's largely the same people for the last 20 years that been in the scene. People grown older, grown beards, beer bellies like me. They have families, they have daily jobs, they have maybe less time and energy as compared to being, say, a student when you have more free time. So productivity is going like slightly down, but the demo scene, I don't think it's disappearing anyway. People are still making productions, people are still dedicated.
Yeah, so maybe we need more new sceners. And talking about that, maybe we could get our second guest here. Could you please show the entry video for Mea? So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. So you are the Scene Lounge producer and quite recent addition to the demo scene, which is really cool. Could you tell me a little bit about the video that we saw and what kind of role have you had in a demo scene?
Right, well, the video was actually made by you, but basically that was pictures of and video of me doing my other hobby, flow arts, basically. Spinning poi and these kind of silk veil fan things. And the actual video part of it was from last year at a small demo party where I actually did my first ever entry submission, which was this kind of wild category where you can do whatever you want. So I did a little performance, and yeah, that's basically that was my first one, and then a second one was last year as well, which was also a performance more than anything else.
So, I can read that maybe you're not a coder. So, was it easy to come into the demo scene, even though if you're not a technical person? I'm not
Well-
saying that you are not, but
Yeah, well, I don't code really. I'd love to learn how to, but I haven't had the time to kind of join in on the workshops. And but yeah, I wouldn't say that it's difficult. You just do. You just have to get there and do what you want to do, and find those kind of parties where there are the kind of wild competitions or whatever, where you can pretty much do anything you want. But then again, I have been going to assembly since 2005, and last year was my first time ever entering any kind of compo, and it wasn't at assembly. So yeah, it took some time to kind of get over the thought of like, oh, I'm not a scener, I can't be a scener, I don't code. But I definitely think it's true. You can do a lot of stuff without coding.
for example, what are people doing?
What are people doing? Oh, well, music and graphics as well, like art stuff. That sounds good. And basically, yeah, like what I did was just performing with, like, I love assembly and I love demo scene, and I also found this new hobby from flow arts, and so I've been kind of like combining those two.
Yes, and as I know, you've done also taken it a little bit more further than just to flow art, and done some visuals like putting lights on the fans and everything. That's cool. So, what kind of events would you recommend for newcomers if they want to come, and how should you try to come into the demo scene if you're interested?
Right, well, obviously assembly and the scene lounge is a good place to start. I know that there are parties in Finland that are especially for newcomers. I myself haven't unfortunately been able to attend them yet, but at least last year there was this graphathon, and it's been before as well. I'm not sure if it's going to be this year, but I definitely hope it would. And next week there is Instanssi in Jyväskylä, which is also like a smaller demo party as well. And
Yeah, I think both of those parties are also the kind of parties where you also have some kind of workshop where you can also make your own demo and learn about visual coding.
yeah, definitely. And that's what we had last summer at Assembly as well. We had the demo workshop and get it for this winter event as well, but unfortunately, due to schedules and stuff, we couldn't. But we did, yeah. But we did have the Fast Effect mini workshop yesterday.
I have to say, the attitudes toward beginners are very different than what they were back in the day. Back in the day, if you didn't know your stuff, you were not a beginner, you were a lamer, which is not so very nice thing to say. And I can relate to I can relate to you a little story from '94 when we had first ever gone to a demo party, Abduction '94 in Rovaniemi. And our first ever demo shown at a competition. We were really like nervous and excited to have it shown on the big screen. We were now part of the scene. And I will never forget the comments I heard from nearby after our demo was shown. The guy next to me sighed, "Tää oli paska. This was shit." So I have to say the attitudes have become much more positive toward beginners over the last 20 years or so.
I think myself that is a very positive change. I remember when I came into the scene, it was a little bit. I'm not saying that I wasn't kind of invited, but it felt a little bit like introverted. But I think it has changed quite a lot, quite recently. Yeah.
And yeah, introverted, and then also kind of like this mystic, secret kind of society thing, but it's definitely it's not that. It's a very welcoming community.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool people. Yeah, next, let's go back to the assembly. So, Mea, how do you see the future of demo scene and scene lounge in assembly?
Well, I personally, I just recently, a couple of weeks ago, started my new full-time job at Assembly as a coordinator, and I've been organizing the event for over 10 years as a volunteer. So I can promise you that I will do what I can to make sure that demo scene is still very alive at Assembly, and I know that is also what the main organizers want and what we are aiming to do. As for Scene Lounge, it's been a very nice kind of area where we can test out new things and play around and bring out new smaller kind of compos, so that we have, because especially during the summer event, the main screen is full of program, so we can't do everything there. But the Scene Lounge makes it possible to have smaller, especially like easier compos for newcomers to join as well. So I'm hoping we can still develop on that.
Yeah, and I think the tupline that we saw earlier, it's a very good example. So if there is people that want to try and enter something in some combo, that is very low-key, very easy, and you can get easily very funny results. But yeah, and what's your personal favorite activity in assembly? You can tell it, it can be from other events also.
Shader Showdown. Absolutely. We had it last summer at Assembly as well, and the finals are in Revision Party in Germany in Easter, and I think it's really good content for any party, but especially for Assembly, where we have audience that know about the demo scene and audience that don't know about it and who are interested in gaming more. And the Shader Showdown Shadow Showdown was something else we did at the after party.
Yeah, I think. Well, you could actually tell about that, because it's kind of also about the memes and funny stuff that there is demo scene, which I myself love.
Yeah, definitely. Like Shader Showdown, the actual thing is of two people coding shaders for 20 minutes or so live and competing each other. And then actually last summer we had ordered the trophies, and and the trophy for Shader Showdown said Shadow Showdown. And from that, Mu came up with an idea of an actual combo that was Shadow Showdown. So that was two teams doing like shadow play at the same time, and like they had 10 minutes or so to prepare. And yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, so it was a kind of like, how to say, non-technical version of the real thing. Yeah, so what is, you can actually both answer this question. What do you like most about demo scene?
Well, for me, I like the community, the people and the parties, and the feeling that you get when you're waiting for the compo to begin and it starts and there's a group of people, even like a large group of people watching it with you, and it's a really cool experience.
Well, I don't have much to add to that. It's the friendship. It's the these guys you've been hanging with for what? It's probably now 30 years with some of them, and you maybe see them once a year, but you still have, you have so much history, shared history behind you that they will probably be your friends forever until one of you kicks the bucket. And then of course this creativity aspect is interesting, important, and nice too. The demo scene for me has been a venue for releasing my own creative works, both graphics and code and whatever I've been doing at any point. So it's been a kind of channel to get your works shown and seen by many other like-minded people. But I guess still it's always been this friendship first.
Yeah, about friends. I think demos it's quite international. What is happening around Europe and world?
Well, yes, it's been very Eurocentric, mostly. First, maybe mostly Western Europe, then when the Iron Curtain fell, much more connection between the East and West Europe. But then when you go outside Europe, it gets kind of scarce. There's little parties and enthusiasts here and there. There used to be much more active US demo scene. Never been quite as big as in Europe. There's one demo party in Japan. There's another party in Australia. There's still North American demo parties. There's even South American enthusiasts. But all in all, I have to say it's been quite Eurocentric, Nordic countries, East European countries, Germany, and all Central European countries. So if a lot of digital culture revolves around Japan, the UK, the US, then at least the demo scene isn't one of those. So it sort of breaks this tripartite system between the US, UK, and Japan that you see so very often on all sorts of history writing and documentaries and all sorts of public discourse. So computers were used elsewhere as well than these hotbeds of the computer and gaming industry.
Yeah, but what is the biggest party right now?
Biggest party? Well, depends on how you count, but maybe I would define Revision as the biggest demo party. Now, what has happened, with Assembly, formerly big demo parties have had more of these gaming tracks, and I understand that it would be hard to have an event of thousands of people with just pure demo scene only. Well, the times have been changing, and it hasn't always been easy when you feel a bit that you're being pushed aside from the limelight. And yeah, apart from the big ones, of course, there's a lot of interesting little parties, even in Finland, where you can go, and then it's maybe more a tightly knit demo scene group there, rather than this all around something for everybody party.
Yeah. You mentioned that there is a lot of also little parties. What is the main difference between a really big party and a small party?
Well, at a small party, pretty much everybody knows each other, and probably has known each other for a few decades already. You have maybe a bit more relaxed rules about, say, alcohol consumption and such things. You have more homely atmosphere. You have very modest prices at competitions. You might not even get much anything out of competition, so you just compete for the sake of it. You don't have necessarily things like sponsors and so on, and you can be a bit less formal and maybe a bit more edgy about it, more specialized. For example, the Finnish Zoo party, that is a Commodore 64 party. You couldn't have an assembly-size event for just the Commodore 64. But little parties can be much more specialized, and yeah, there's pros and cons to both as I see it.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't want to see small
parties. So there's parties
go.
also including old computers. But why do you people have that fascination of old computers still?
This is a big question. But first of all, I would say to have a Commodore 64 party these days, I think the biggest reason is that that's the childhood computer of those people who are involved in the current C64 scene. Pretty much all of those people had a C64 in the 80s, or at least some friend of them did. And I think nostalgia plays a big role. But then apart from that, also these like old school platforms, they are so uniform that they go well in line with this like demoscene ethic of doing the impossible and like pushing the hardware. If it's like current day computers, like it's not so very impressive to do some like cool shader stuff unless you do it in very small size or something that's never been done before. Whereas on these old computers, you can still like do this like pushing and impossible, and people know that, okay, this is impossible. I know this hardware like the back of my hand, and still this guy here managed to do something that's never been done before. So it goes well in line with this demoscene ethic of competing, and you can like compare between the demos much easier than on today's hardware.
Yeah, that's true. I think Mia has something to say too.
Yeah, about the how it's not so much about because the computers nowadays are so powerful, you don't really need to think about what you can do technically. So especially for the newcomers side, it's increasingly, I think, more about the creativity and the actual flow of the demo, and there needs to be a story of some kind. It needs to be visually pleasing, but also like there needs to be a start, a middle, and an ending. So that's when you get more towards the art aspect of it. So you don't really need to, if you find a group of people where someone can code and someone can do the graphics, someone can do the music, and then there's someone with the vision of what you want to get done, then that's also one option of getting into the demo scene, I think.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, when you do these things, what is like the most impressive thing that you've seen?
The most impressive thing, I think, still is Life Force when we were at Hartwell Arena. I don't remember the year, but I remember watching it, and it just went on and on and on. It was like it would never end, and it was just blowing my mind again and again. And back then, I didn't really even know what it was about that well. But it was, yeah, that's something that I'll remember forever.
Oh, well. I've obviously seen a few demos, and these days I'm not so easily impressed anymore, but I have to say when on the Amiga 500, I was actually a PC guy initially, and then only later on got to know Amiga. So to see something like say a tracker, a music composition software running on Amiga 500, I was like, what, my PC cannot do this, and this Amiga here is supposed to be like a gaming machine, and it can play this like 4-channel audio that my PC cannot, and like, what is this? And a couple of other Amiga 500 demos I saw, say Enigma by Phenomena, and then the techno demo, State of the Art. They were like, wow, like this is crazy stuff. Like, I couldn't do this, but I need to learn how to do this.
Yeah, for me it's also one of the best things in demo scene. I think it's people are doing really, really cool and amazing stuff. I might don't know how, but also people are quite willing to teach and kind of give information, which I think is really cool too. But now we have a few questions that have been asked in our from our audience. One was that, what is a typical scener?
Okay.
How can you call yourself a demo scener?
When I've been telling my students about the same subject, just a couple of weeks ago I gave a lecture at my home university about the demo scene, and I who is a typical demo scener? I said, me. A guy in their 40s or close to their 40s, who's been involved for quite a while, and yeah. I think I'm personally quite typical demoscener in that respect. It's been very male initially. I have to say, still in the 90s, you wouldn't see much women going to demo parties, and if they were usually like somebody's girlfriend. But that has been changing. But like still the prototypical demoscener is maybe, in particular, those like people who've been around for long is still like is me.
Yeah, it's probably you, but a little less sober. But
Hey.
no, but yeah, I mean, that's what you see at demo parties. It's basically older men, not older, but in their 40s. Sorry.
Okay, you're saying that seriously, and there is 2 females on the stage, but okay.
Yeah, no, but like, I was continuing that it's not like I think the question itself kind of it's kind of funny because I don't see that there is any typical demo scener, because I've met so many different kind of people through the demo scene that it's not really like, I think it's a wide demography and it's getting wider all the time.
Yeah, for me that is also the same thing. There is quite a variety of people with different professions and different backgrounds and different interests, which is, I think, it's really cool. But I think this is what I've heard. One description is, if you call yourself a scener, you are a demo scener. I think that kind of best describes it, because it's not easy to say that somebody has to do these things to be a scener. But I think the interest in a demo scene, and if you think that you are, then you are.
First of all, you can probably definitely find people who are at the very core of the demo scene, who've been involved and really active for 3 decades or something. And then I've recently started to get more interested on these fringes of the demo scene. There's been people who once contributed, who maybe did tracker music for a demo, then they never did anything after that. People who have just been viewing demos, going to parties, but never contributed. So it's not this tightly defined a border there, who is out and who is in. But that said, especially in the 90s, when the demo scene started becoming more self-conscious, there was a lot of this definition, who's in and who's out. And that's why also the attitudes toward other communities were much more, I'd say, problematic, maybe even hostile, because you were on the process of defining yourself, okay, we are the demo sceners and they are not. And these days, there's much less of this need to define who's in and who's out.
That is, yeah, definitely. And then there's also one question: why should you become a scener?
Well, awesome parties. You can meet a lot of cool people, make new friends, lifelong friends, and maybe even learn something new. You get a really good excuse to travel, and yeah, do stuff.
Yeah, for me also, it has been a kind of an outlet to do my all crazy ideas that I really kind of cannot do in my other hobbies or normal life. So I think I like that aspect.
Well, since there's so big variety of digital culture these days, then in some sense the demo scene is facing very heavy competition. There's so many other things you can do on a computer these days, but at least one thing I can see there is that it's one of the longest surviving tracks of digital culture. So in the demo scene, you are part of a very long historical continuum already. And like you said, it's one channel to get your work shown and seen by others. So there's at least some motivation. But
Yeah.
maybe this outreach is something that I'm not so good with. So I'll let others do that.
So we also have a little bit of time. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question? If you have somebody wants to ask questions, we have sodas that we can give you. I see that there's... Okay, Aiming has a question. You can also ask a question.
Well, I don't have a question, but if there's anyone in the audience that wants to ask a question, I will bring this mic to you.
Okay, I see. We've been... True, oh, there's questions. Yeah.
Hello, hello. Thanks for the lecture. I was wondering, as a complete newbie, what is the form of the final submission of a demo? Is it like a video file? And is the video file the thing you compress if you want to like fit in the 4K category, or is it some kind of another product?
Okay. What you most often submit to competitions, if it's a demo, intro of any size, that would be an executable file. And then if it's a demo, usually then you have some like data files on top of that. So it's like different categories. There's a 4K intros, 1K intros, so on, and all those like define how much data and code you can include. But most of the demo scene entries are some sort of like executable programs.
Thank you. That was a very good question. Okay, so Thoron has a question.
So, could you perhaps tell that what's the relation between these famous new Finnish gaming companies and demoscene?
Okay, who wants to answer?
Seems to be me.
Okay.
Okay, Thoron, there, a demoscene guy himself. Amicus as well. Well, this is something that is often brought up when you discuss the demo scene. There is this like link to gaming companies and the gaming industry. And on the one hand, it is there, and it is true that particularly those 90s Finnish and also other European game companies were definitely linked to the demo scene. There's like household names you would recognize, like Housemarque and Remedy and Bugbear and such, that were all founded by demo scene people. One reason, of course, is that the skills, the programming, the musical composition, 3D modeling, 2D graphics, they are skills that you also need at the gaming industry. So there's like quite a natural path from there. And if you have a team of capable people, then some people thought that why don't we make games and earn money out of this? These days, probably a lot less. So these days, those people who went for the gaming industry are there, and not so many new demo sceners are necessarily being recruited into companies anymore. Definitely the link is there, but on the other hand, I don't want to portray the demo scene as some sort of preschool for the gaming industry. Nobody did demos because of that, and demos are important and valuable in themselves, even without going to the industry after that.
Yeah, I totally agree. There is some recruiting in some events, but the demos are really, they themselves are important, and they're art. But I think we've maybe... Oh, there's another question.
Hi there. Thanks for the nice presentation. Just a question and kind of a suggestion, maybe for the next summer assembly. How about letting the people who do the entries and participate in the competitions? What about if you organize some interview with them and let the guys and people behind the productions actually tell a bit of the tricks and what they've done and so forth. So that would give a bit of the background, because when the compos are presented, people just see sort of things on the screen, and since the background of the audience is quite versatile nowadays, like it's old guys, and then it's sort of the newcomers, and then it's just people maybe from the gaming scene. So just let those who have done what is on the screen explain a bit how they did it, and if, like, on the old school category, like, what are the limits of the real hardware and why an effect is actually a cool. So that's maybe something that people at the audience doesn't nowadays really understand.
Yeah, actually, next weekend there's Instance demo party at Jyväskylä, and they actually do that. And I think it's pretty cool, because the people that have made productions, they can tell what was their inspiration, what did they use, whatever they want to tell. And it kind of gives more, how to say, context, yes, for the whole thing. But yeah, it's a very good point and very good idea.
Yeah, definitely. And we do have like compo studio normally after the compos, where there are people discussing the entries, but not normally the people who have actually participated in the specific compo. But that is a good idea. And we do have the slides, like on before the entry itself. It has like a few words about how it was made, the specific entry. And I think a couple of years back, we started to have these intro videos before the compo itself that has just a really quick kind of what is this about, but not like that this is the demo compo and all platforms allowed and whatnot. But yeah, definitely. And actually, if you've been here today, we've been showing some old demos and intros, even a game dev video where from earlier assembly events, where there is like this slide before and after that explains shortly what the compo was about, and then just the name of the entry and when it was released and what was the position of it, how did it get prizes or anything. So that's something we set up for now, but we will most definitely be using it afterwards as well, because I think it's definitely like this is a really good place. Scene Lounge is a really good place to show all the old demos that we have, because we have a ton of them. We've been doing this since '92, and so our archive is full of awesome stuff that we could show. But I don't see that it would be as beneficial to just show them without actually explaining what it's about and when it has been done, because like Markus' production here before, what was it, 17 years ago? And like you wouldn't know that if you looked at it. So I think it's really good to have some context. So definitely, yeah, we'll put that into thought for next year.
Yeah, so if there's no other questions, I think we've done. Thank you, Mea, thank you, Markku, and thank you to audience. Everybody watching here and home. So,
and next up we will have Truck's demo show as well. As soon as he actually gets here, he's been on a tram and getting here, and yeah. But yeah, about 8 o'clock we'll start.
Yeah, and that demo show is actually really cool because, well, we have competitions at parties, but this is about Meteorix nominations, and Meteorix, it's kind of like Oscars of demo scene. They are given for entries that have been done around the year, and they have been selected by some people and been voted on. And in Easter party in revision, they have the ceremony where they announce the winners. So I think it's going to be a very good demo show. Good quality. So, thank you.
Amiga.